Okay, first things first. I'm going to have a little new format for the podcast from now on. I'll tell you soon what inspired the change, but yeah, it's going to be kind of in 3 segments from now on. The first thing is going to be like quick thoughts, where sometimes I might have thoughts on the last episode that I recorded the week before. Sometimes I have these afterthoughts, like I record things and just whatever, I just do it one shot. And then later I'm like, oh man, I could have added this or I could have added that. Or in some cases, other people might have things to add and I would like to include those still. So the beginning quick thoughts might, have some things to do with the last episode, or just other things that are going on that might be relevant to what's happened in the past week since the last episode. Then, I'm going to do what I usually do, which is talk about the main topic, whatever that is, and just rant about it and go on in one long shot there. And then a little epilogue at the end. And during that time, usually what I would like to see happen for that is to answer questions. Answer questions from listeners or people watching the YouTube channel. That really excites me. And I actually just earlier today put out a call on the Facebook stories and Instagram as well for questions from people. And I got a couple responses, and some of them I saved, and I'm going to use those for later. Some of them I think I could actually make into topics for a whole podcast, and some of them are just answers or questions that I could answer really quickly at the end that wouldn't really give me enough to talk about for a whole podcast necessarily, but still something cool that I got to think about and then I get to respond to. So that's kind of the new format that I'm looking at. One reason is because I enjoy about an hour for a podcast. Making it or listening to it, I think that's a really good length. And, sometimes I don't want to shy away from a topic because it's not long enough. And I think I've done that before, which is why I have these other segments that I'm thinking of too, the quick thoughts and the epilogue, because sometimes I maybe something that have happened during the week and I want to talk about it. It's relevant to my artist life. And I just don't think I can get, a half hour to 45 minutes or whatever out of that one thing. But this is a way of making the podcast a little longer because on my own, I am finding that they are a little shorter. Now, I'm sure that's great for some people. I mean, you can always split them up too, though. If you can only listen to a half hour a week for whatever reason, you split it up somehow. But, yeah, I'm just finding that I still want to get more out of it. This is one way to do it. And this is kind of inspired by another podcaster named Heather who left me a voicemail. So I use a platform to host my RSS feed, and it is anchor.fm. So that's what hosts my RSS feed for the podcast. And then you can pick it up on other apps. If they can pick up the RSS feed, then whatever, right? So there is someone who left me a voicemail on the anchor.fm site or app. I didn't even know that was a thing. I had no idea. But her name's Heather, and she is from the state of Maine, I believe. And shout out to Heather. She has a podcast called The Calligraphy Consultant. I checked it out a little bit. It's actually pretty cool, and she just started it. I think it's been less than a month or about a month, and she's put up I think over 10 episodes already. She's just like firing on all cylinders there. But she left me this really nice voicemail that was just saying, "Hey, I listened to your episode on contemporary artist legacies," and she gave me some of her own thoughts, and I thought that was really nice. She also was just really encouraging and positive. She enjoyed the podcast. And seeing as how now this is a new thing for me by only doing it by myself, I was like, oh, that was really nice to hear that it doesn't have the same dynamic it used to with, two of us back and forth talking. And on the very second episode that I made, I got some positive feedback from a stranger. That was really nice. So as I was saying, I got this voicemail and it got me thinking because one of these things, she gave me input on that last episode, said, hey, maybe this is a reason why in the past, in past centuries, artists had an easier time of leaving a legacy or became more of important figures and stuff. She brought up the patron system, which is something just completely slipped my mind. She's an art historian, and I don't want to say I care very little for art history, but I don't put my time and attention and energy and focus into doing legitimate research into art history. Something I've talked a little bit about before, which I will definitely talk about again in the future, my focus on contemporariness with myself. I find value in art history. It's just really hard for me to research anything in a formal context, even if I'm interested. So it just needs to be put in a way that I can consume it easier. And I'll get into that some other time. But yeah, she talked about the patron system, and I was like, of course, like that's of course. Artists had ways that they were supported financially. I mean, the only thing I can compare it to now is if you have a collector, a dedicated collector of your work, being like, yo, I want a new piece from you every 6 months or one a year, or I'm gonna give you the finances so that you can paint a mural for my community or for whatever, right? So in different eras, I guess, of the world and places and times, they had these patrons. Right now we have things like Patreon. We have systems put in place now that we didn't have before. In some ways, again, because of technology and ease of accessibility, we've got even more reach. It doesn't have to be local. We can be funded by people with these crowdfunding apps and websites and stuff through people all over the world. So, I mean, that was just a really good point, and I really wanted to talk about it, and that's why I started thinking about, like, oh man, like, quick thoughts. Like, I could have these quick thoughts that kind of discuss some things that maybe I've learned, or my thoughts, or in this case, someone else's thoughts about the topic I talked about last week, in a way to kind of wrap it up and extend it a little bit, because I find almost all the time I walk away saying, why didn't I say that? Why didn't I think of that until 2 days later? Like, I'm still thinking about it sometimes. And in this case, like I said, someone else was thinking about it and gave me some feedback. And I love that, especially because it was a stranger. And I got really excited about it. And that's what made me kind of feel like I should change and do this format. So, yeah, that was a great point. Like I said, the patron system easily could have been a reason why artists had a certain type of legacy they had then that we don't have now. Again, now with technology and ease of accessibility to information and people and artists, and we can view them and see them, and we can support them too internationally if we're aware of them and if they have a system set up like a Patreon or some type of GoFundMe or whatever. We have the opportunity for that, but again, there's so many people and oversaturation and stuff like that. But I just thought I wanted to bring that parallel back to it, that we do have opportunity for that still. It's just not the same. And again, beforehand, when there were only so many people. But yeah, that is another type of person that would have been able to support an artist and help them in their legacy. People that had a lot of disposable income that wanted to support artists in this way. Which brings me to one way you can support me, and that's just by doing this, by giving me feedback. I mean, obviously sharing the podcast with people if you find it interesting and you think some other people might find it interesting. I would love you to share it too. That would be fantastic. I don't really have any sponsors. I don't have anything set up for any financial gain. However, I just want to be able to engage with a community of artists or people who appreciate art, fans of art, other podcasters. Like, this is great. And I did mention, and I'll mention it again, just a shout out to Heather, who has the podcast Calligraphy Consultant. Did some art history. I can't remember. I think she said Vermont, and I should have written that down. But I checked out her podcast. I was very curious. I was like, how can you do a podcast just about calligraphy? It is so specific. Not like there isn't a lot of crazy cool stuff, but to me it would be more like an instructional visual type thing. So I was really curious, and then I checked it out, and she does way more stuff than just calligraphy. So something cool to check out. A couple episodes that kind of caught my eye. She talks about stamp collecting. She talks about different things that have to do with art history that she's knowledgeable about. Rembrandt and stereo blindness was one that kind of caught my eye. I was like, what does that even mean? Like, what is stereo blindness? And another one was the value of handwritten journals. And so those are just some. And like I said, she's putting out a lot of content really quick. So that's something that you might want to check out. But moving on. That is just kind of me explaining the different segments, the new format that I want to try out, and just being thankful for that feedback. I always have, again, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, there's links in the description. There's a LinkTree, and it takes you to my Instagram, to my Facebook, to the Etsy, I think is maybe not to the Etsy, but to the Anchor, which is where I host the podcast. I guess there's a way to leave voicemail, so maybe you could do that. But you can message me, you can email me, what have you, with questions or comments. I would love the feedback. And the same thing with if you just find it on the Anchor website, anchor.fm. I should have written the website down, probably /ArtistLife podcast or just ArtistLife. I don't recall, but you can Google it, you'll find it. But yeah, I have an Instagram for the ArtistLife podcast. I have a Facebook page set up for ArtistLife podcast as well. And you can find ways, or just artistlifepodcast@gmail.com. You can send in emails. I would love to hear from you, and then, get me thinking about stuff, because I like the conversation and the back and forth, and not just me dispersing and expressing without any stimulus whatsoever from outside sources. The fact that people are listening and enjoying it makes me really happy, and getting an actual conversation going is what I really love. So moving on. I got this main topic. I was kind of set to talk about something else today, but this main topic actually came from one of the questions that someone asked me. So when I put it out on my story, hey, ask me questions for Artist Life podcast, I was mostly thinking in my head that I would want to use these for like the epilogue and just answer a little thing. But someone asked me a question that I think I could have a whole podcast about, and I just felt to be in the mood for it. I felt like I was in the mood for it. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. The question was, how has your art practice changed in the past 10 years? I'm going to go beyond that a little bit. I'm not going to answer it specifically exactly the way they asked it. I thought it was a perfect one to talk about right now because it is a brand new year. It is 2020. We're not even a week in at the time of me recording this right now. So I didn't really have an art practice. It's been a little over 10 years that I've had what I would call an art practice. I guess what I want to do is try to maybe define that term a little bit too, just from my own thoughts and what I think of when people say art practice. But I do want to go past the 10 years and give you a little bit more information about me and kind of where I came from artistically in a very, very, very quick overview. But I didn't really know I was interested in visual art in high school. My art teacher was not very engaging, and we just did a bunch of still lifes and grid portraits and that kind of thing. It wasn't too exciting. I really liked playing with letters though, and then I moved to a big city because I was in a very small town of 2,500 people, but I moved to a big city, or a bigger city. In comparison, it was 300,000 people approximately, and I learned about graffiti. And this is when I'd already graduated high school. I didn't really know anything about graffiti. I was doing it, not illegally, but I was doing it on my binders and stuff without even realizing what I was doing. I was playing with letters, and I got introduced to this through someone who was, vandalizing with graffiti, and that's kind of what started me getting interested in art. I wouldn't call that part of my art practice. That started happening, I think, in 2005, and I would say I probably didn't start an art practice really the way that I would call it until about 2007. And even then, it'd be really hard for me to call it my art practice. When I think of the word art practice, I think of something a little more formal. It doesn't have to be that way, but I definitely think of it as a little more formal, as in hey, I've got the studio space. Even if I didn't have a studio space, it's about treating it like work. And I don't mean work as in a job where you're getting paid. I mean work as in something that you are investing time and energy into, physical, emotional, mental, time and energy. And to me, I think it's very consuming to have an art practice. That also implies that it's something you do often, because I think practice is something that happens repeatedly, habitually, often. And so that's kind of how like I said, you don't have to have a studio. You don't have to have, you don't even have to be necessarily getting anything financial from it, like selling work. I do want to talk about different things that make up my art practice and what I think of that. Different elements such as, exhibiting work, selling work, creating custom work, or commissioned work, same thing, and then personal expression. And I really think you can throw all the other stuff out the window and you can still have an art practice if it's just a practice of personal expression. I really firmly believe that. Even though I think the word art practice implies something more formal, I don't mean formal in like an academic, I guess dedicated, that's the word, not formal. Dedicated. I think you can have a dedicated art practice, but I think just an art practice period denotes dedication. I think it implies you are committed to this craft. It's like saying, I don't know how to, it's just that terminology, art practice, is just kind of unique to what it is. Instead of being like sport practice, you do have practice in your sport. Yeah, I got basketball practice tonight. I guess it's not that unique of a term, but anyway, yeah, that's kind of how I would loosely define art practice. So, and the question again was, how has your art practice changed in the past 10 years? So, again, it's probably a little over 10 years that I'm talking about, and I don't know when my art practice really started, because I mean, I started doing graffiti illegally. I got busted a couple times. Again, if you want to know more about that whole thing in the beginning of that, I would check out FK Arts, which is my personal art social media stuff, and there's a YouTube channel for that. There's a podcast for that called Artist Personal Journalist, and you can find that stuff through the link trees and whatever. But there, I've told for the YouTube channel, and it's on the podcast as well, under the playlist Story Time. I talk about, like, I think it's called Graffiti and Me, and I think there's 4 or 5 different installments in that talk about that kind of period of my life. But I got busted a couple times over the course of a couple of years, and decided it wasn't worth it, and then realized, during that time, before I even got busted, finally, I started to do some things on canvas, and then I just dedicated to only doing stuff on canvas. I was drawing in sketchbooks and stuff as well, so I was doing more than just illegal graffiti, but I was practicing the art form of letter structure, stylized letters, on paper and on canvas, and making things for people. I don't think I would have called that an art practice yet, but I guess coincidentally around the time I started university. So, man, when did I actually officially start? I think it would have been, I finished, let's do maths. I don't know what time, 2005? No, it should have been 2006? I don't remember the year I started university, but I'm going to say 2006. Yes, that makes sense, 2006, because it took me about 9 years to do 2 degrees. So 2006, around that time, is when I think I would have started saying, I have an art practice. So that's more like 14 years. I don't think, that's in retrospect. When I was in the middle of it, I don't think I would have said, I have an art practice. But that is when I started to try and sell things. And I was making different work. I started doing abstract work that came very natural to me from the graffiti background before I started university. So it was like the summer of 2006 before going into my first semester of classes. And that was the thing. Actually, I didn't take an art class until 2007 because I was very limited. I barely made the cutoff for entering the University of Saskatchewan with my average. So they put me in a program that only allowed me to take 3 classes at a time for the first year. It was off campus, it was somewhere else, and I didn't have any studio classes then. So I didn't take studio classes until 2007. But I believe it was the summer of 2006 that I started doing some abstract work, and just with spray paint in my fingers was the very first one, and a stencil. I put an FK stencil on there. I still have that piece, the very first abstract piece I ever made. The first thing I guess I would even call art in a way. It was a very, I don't know what to call it, primal expression. I don't want to say primal. It might, imply other things. But it was raw, and it was super colorful, and I don't even have a good picture of it, honestly, so I don't even think I'll put it in the YouTube video. But I have it at home. I should take a good picture of it sometime. But anyway, shortly after that, I started, or maybe shortly after university, so maybe it was 2007-ish, where I started to attempt to sell some work. I was making a little more work. Some of it was abstract, or I guess mostly it was abstract, and I was still doing graffiti on canvas and some vinyl records and things like that. Those things I, started to do as like a custom thing. So before I had an exhibition, even, I was selling work. Very, very minimal work. I mean, even now, I don't sell a ton of work, but a little more consistently than I did then. I'm also creating more in social media and whatever is a thing more than it was then. More exposure, etc. But still not even close to consistent. But I started to sell just to people that I knew. I remember just like someone approached me and asked me like, oh, could you do can you do it on vinyl? Can you do like this word on vinyl? I remember the one I made. It was like purple and white and black, and it said passion on one side. I don't remember what the other side said, but it was double-sided, and they like hung it up like a mobile, like with a like string, and they could see both sides of it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And it didn't like snowball or anything, but it got me thinking like, oh, maybe I can actually advertise this somehow. I started to sell stuff on Kijiji every once in a while. I posted stuff there. I didn't know about buy and sell groups on Facebook for years and years and years. I don't even know when they started. I've only really been utilizing that for, I don't know, the past 3 or 4 years. Before that, I really wasn't aware of them or using them as a place to sell art. And now it is somewhat helpful. I sell more art through there than Kijiji. And that's part of it just changes depending on the city I'm in too and the culture there. So in Lethbridge, I definitely sell more through the buy and sell groups than Kijiji because people aren't looking on Kijiji as much, or they're not looking for art anyway. So yeah, I started selling stuff. Eventually, I started exhibiting. I don't have my CV with me, and I don't remember the very first exhibition right now, but I remember the first couple. And I started doing this with like a partner who was my roommate at the time, and we started exhibiting work together. So we had a body of work that we had at 3 different galleries, and the last time I think it changed a little bit. It was still like the same artist statement possibly, or maybe it was changed a little bit with a lot of the same work in it, but some had been sold off and we added to it because we were still playing with the theme. Yeah, and I was trying to sell work, and then my art practice at that time was also academic because I was working on my Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. So my art practice was just, I don't know, it was in its infancy, I guess. I don't even really think I knew that term, and if I did, I didn't apply it to myself at this point. But, around 2007, 2008, 2009, whatever, I was slowly building an art practice. I didn't have studio space. I worked at the university. I should say I had studio space, but it was not dedicated to me. I didn't have any private space. I had space at the university while I was taking art classes. There was the drawing studio I preferred working in rather than the painting studio. And I had lockers and had my supplies there. And then during the summer, I tried to keep a locker there too and pay for one over the summer and go in. And again, go in with my roommate and make work together, or made my own. It definitely was not super crazy regular. And I was doing stuff for assignments too, and I was also doing stuff for myself. So I did mention that one of the things I want to talk about was personal expression. And so the very first couple of pieces of what I would call art that I ever made, because a lot of the graffiti stuff I was making at the time was more design work, I would say, than it was art. And the first pieces of art that I made were all abstract, and they were very much about personal expression. The first one was very playful, but after that they became conceptual. Abstract, where I was expressing something. Conceptual is the wrong word here because that's gonna be a whole other thing. They had a concept, they had a theme. I was expressing something specific. The first one I was not, but after that I was expressing a lot of pain through the first 3 or 4 abstracts that I made, or 5 or 6. And they had a very similar color palette too, which was like cream or white, and then scarlet, burgundy, blood color, and black. And I remember those pieces. So I had some personal expression stuff that was happening before I even went into university, before I even knew what an abstract painting was, and I was making those. And then in university I took, drawing and painting classes. I took a figure drawing class as well. That introduced me to the human figure and the body, and I really started liking working with that. I've done way more portraits than I have of figures, like full figures. I really enjoyed it at the time. I did a lot of pen and ink stuff, and I really liked that because I was more accurate with it. I feel like I'm going into too much detail, but here, I never included the pen and ink drawings into my actual art practice, though. I never really sold anything or really made art with even human figure drawings, I'd done a couple paintings that included the figure. Painting just with acrylic specifically was the thing I do the most. And I use spray paint a lot. And that's definitely a huge carryover from doing graffiti. I really love, splatters and drips and that kind of mess. And it just covers things so quick. And the spray paint that I use is just amazing because I use Montana cans only and Montana colors. So the Spain and the German stuff, that's really exclusively what I use. I don't even know if in the video you can see there's some over here. But yeah, again, without a studio space too, without a real one, I didn't use any spray paint. In my art practice at first. I was using, pretty much only acrylic. And I guess really early I started experimenting with stuff. People would leave things in the studio, they'd leave them behind, they'd get shoved somewhere, they'd be in the sink that someone forgot to clean, whatever. They'd be on the floor. I would take these things and I would start using them in my own work. There were things outside. I remember going and gathering cigarette butts and putting it into my work. I started to experiment really early with these abstract pieces, playing with texture a lot. That is still something I love. The things that I started creating art, I feel, just barely before I got any real schooling in it, before entering into the BFA program. And there was a lot of openness. Sometimes I feel like, the BFA program there at the University of Saskatchewan they could have done more, but I'm glad in some aspects that they didn't. Like, I felt, in retrospect, like at the time, I feel like I wasn't learning anything, and I didn't appreciate the fact that it was so open until later. And later is when I realized they have given me the time and space to explore what I need to explore. There were some helpful tips and tricks along the way with some professors and instructors as well, and some people not so much, I found, but there were some things that were really, really great. Some concepts that I didn't even understand then that I understood much better later. Some things that I never really used, like certain things with color theory. Seeing color as value was a huge lesson that I got from Alison Norland. Thank you very much. It's something that I introduced to high school students because I, was teaching art at high school, and I introduced that concept early because I wish someone had done it when I was in high school, because it's super important, I believe. But anyway, so during my university years, I started to develop more of an art practice with, I started experimenting early, I kept experimenting, but mainly I was very much still focused on drawing and painting, mostly painting. Even to this day, 90%, if not more, of what I've ever sold, what I've ever created in this aspect of talking about visual art is painting. Mostly acrylic. Again, I've used some nail polish, I've used some spray paint, a lot of spray paint more these days. And that's because of space and having a studio and stuff like that. But yeah, I started to exhibit work, and there was a little bit there's this part in my CV that's just like having 1 or 2 exhibitions a year. I think starting in about 2006 or 2007, every single year until I moved to Lethbridge, and then or maybe the year before I moved here, there's like a gap where I didn't exhibit anything for a year, and then I've started to exhibit, once a year since moving here, which has been great. But there was a little gap there. But I was starting to really search out these opportunities to exhibit, and I was very focused on what I would call capital A art, what I thought was, the bee's knees of art. Like, I didn't really see anything else as art. I was very much high art, capital A art. I excluded things like design. I still do to some degree. My definition of art has changed a lot. I've talked about that before and probably will again, about defining art for myself and that challenge being brought to me during university. And I extend that challenge to many people that I meet, including high school students that I teach, to define art for yourself and keep revising that over time. But that was one thing I was focused on, is like, how do I define art? You're right. And then to me, I obviously have to think about what I include and what I exclude. And I excluded a lot purposefully. But the definition that I had was art is an expression of passion without compromise, I believe. I mean, it was different. It was longer before, but I whittled it down to that, which excludes a lot of things. I would say without compromise, right? So if I'm doing something custom for someone and it has nothing to do with what I would want to do, that's compromise. So all of a sudden we start talking about what is a technician, what is an artist, what is an artisan, what is someone who, like I said, a technician to me is someone who's amazing, has amazing technical ability, and maybe all they do though is do work for hire that has nothing to do with personal expression or passion, really. That's just one way that I look at it. But I was very much wanting to keep momentum of exhibiting. Some of the stuff was at the university, other places in Saskatoon. One was in Melfort at the Shervin Smith Gallery, I think is what it's called there. And I did that as a partnered exhibition. So I was very focused on that. At the time, like again, I was very into strong concepts. I had nothing to do with design. I was very focused on this is what this means. It means something. And when people didn't understand the meaning, sometimes it upset me if they expressed that they thought they knew what was going on and that wasn't it at all. If they didn't read the artist statement, I was very elitist and very self-important. I can't shy away from that. That's just where I was at. Probably still that way, just not even close to as much as I was, then, like 10 years ago, or over 10 years ago. I was so focused, on assignments and stuff. I was doing a lot of personal art and fulfilling assignment work. And then when it came time, and this would have been in like 5 years after art classes and stuff, it came time to do my BFA exhibition. the exhibition that I needed to create in order to graduate from, or in order to get my degree in Bachelor of Fine Arts. And painting and drawing were both my main focuses. I had to take some other art classes here and there that I wasn't like too keen on, like sculpture and printmaking, just as a part of my degree to get certain well-roundedness. But yeah, I that last year or so, like I'm trying to think. I'd have to go back and look how many paintings did I really make that had nothing to do with my exhibition. I'm sure I made a handful, but I was so focused on that exhibition and just really leaned into it all the way. I never sold any of that work. They were very large. They were installations. It was very conceptual, very, very conceptual. And I just, looking back, the two professors that like basically juried my exhibition, and it was my like senior painting prof and senior drawing, they had said like, you should take this somewhere, like you should exhibit this work. And at the time I was just like, how? Like I didn't even know what to do. I was like, how? Like this stuff is huge. I have no way of transporting this stuff. I didn't know anything beyond the simple steps of like, well, I could explore some galleries, I guess, but I just didn't really think about like, how would I write a proposal necessarily? How could I get the funding? How could I get this stuff shipped? Like that was just so overwhelming to me that I abandoned all that work. I kept a couple of the boards that were portraits of me, but these huge installment parts I just didn't keep. Anyway, yeah, so that was a part of my art practice at the time. But as soon as I graduated, and that was out the window. So once all the academic stuff was out of the window and I finished it, I was still in the College of Education. I had to do 2 years of that before I got my education degree. And in that time, I was still trying to focus on exhibiting work. It definitely slowed down a little bit. I did not have as much time. I was really working hard in the College of Ed, and academics, formal education does not come easy to me. So I really busted my butt, and happy to say that I finished and got that degree. But yeah, I was still, focused on the abstract a lot, focused on what I was feeling, blah, 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 blah. Dedicated studio spaces were still very slim, and I had a garage at a couple points that was very hard to work in. I couldn't work in there in the winter. There was no insulation in the two garages that I was using at different points. And yeah, that was just very limiting because I didn't have a lot of space inside, and I'm a very messy person. I like working big. Even if the pieces aren't big, I need space to work. And the mediums that I use, like spray paint and stuff, they demand in some ventilation of some nature, which I don't even have in this studio. I can't open these windows behind me. There's no ventilation really for that. But if I pick and choose the times, I use a mask when I'm in here, and then as soon as I'm done spray painting, I just leave and don't come back for the next day. And from doing that the evening or the weekends, it usually doesn't bother anyone else that has studio space here. So anyway, yeah, I was still focused on trying to sell stuff and whatnot. I started, at some point, I don't know when, maybe 2009 or 10 or 12, I really can't recall. In that area, I started to do things like the Fringe in Saskatoon and Saskatoon Pride Fest. I started to be a vendor at those, again with like my roommate at the time, who I was doing a lot of partnered exhibitions with and stuff. And so I did Fringe alone once or twice as well. And so I tried to like sell some smaller work, make some smaller work. I guess that's one area I started to do less art and more what I wouldn't have called art, but I was catering to what I thought people would buy at a certain point, because maybe there seemed to be a lot of people interested in something. So I was making some smaller work, and it really quickly became not worth it to me. Because I had bigger work too, like even if it was $40, and bigger isn't that big. Like 16 by 20, 18 by 24, that's not very big, but bigger than a vinyl, which is what people seem to want at the time. And I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to spend my time just doing graffiti on vinyl, and then I just wasn't into it. And I wanted to sell the stuff that I was making for me, my personal work, and it just was too expensive for the crowds there. Or just they just didn't want it, basically. So I just found it not worth my time and energy or my finances. I just didn't enjoy it, so I stopped doing it. But there was that kind of trade show element a little bit that I had tried for a bit in order to sell some of the work I was making, because that's the other thing with my art practice is I make so much more work than I can sell. because I don't have I don't have patrons, I don't have collectors. I mean, on my CV, I list collectors because they own 3 or more pieces of mine. So I shouldn't say I don't have collectors, but I mean committed, like scheduled, consistent, like buying pieces from me, you know, once a year or whatever. That's not a thing that I have at my disposal. So I don't have any regular income with art or a way to, you know, sell my work consistently. And then, yeah, I don't know, there was a big period of my life where like I was creating and just experimenting so much, being in that school environment, having access to these studio spaces and just like space. And then after that, it got a little rocky because I didn't have as much space. I wasn't surrounded by it. My academic workload had nothing to do with visual art anymore. So I found it a little harder to work and make time for it. And then, you know, my art practice was still there. I was still trying to figure out ways that I could sell work, because every time I moved, which back then was very frequently, I just had to move all this art at some point. Like I had to move it from here to here to here to here to here. When I was kept at the university, that was a whole other thing. I had to bring some home. I didn't have space to keep it. Whatever. I guess that brings me to Lethbridge in a way. And, you know, the past 3 years that I've been here in my art practice, how I really feel like this is the first, like, I could have said 5 years ago I had an art practice. It just wasn't what it is now. And honestly, the studio space has so much to do with it. So much. Here, I really feel like I have an art practice. And like I said, you don't need a studio space. It's all mental. To me, it is really mental on how you see the work that you do. The space gives me personally a lens, an opportunity to see my work in a certain way, to treat myself more seriously, to make use of the space. I'm paying rent here. Like I want to be productive. I want to have quality interactions. It just feels, because it's separate from my house, I'm not working in my house, like it's more compartmentalized. So I feel for the first time like, man, I have an art practice. I do not make a living off my art, not even close. Like I very rarely in the last year and a half have even been able to pay my rent, which is only $200 for the studio space, with selling my art. Like very rarely have I ever been able to sell $200 worth of work in a month. There's many months I don't sell a single thing. Sometimes I sell $30, $50, sometimes $100, maybe a couple pieces that are 50 or 70. And very many months, the majority of months, I sell absolutely nothing. And I still make stuff because that's just what I need to do. But my art practice has really been focused more on me. So it's kind of everything now. But I brought it back to the personal expression, because for a while there, I was so like, when I was focused on these concepts and this more high art, capital A art type stuff, and this pretentious work in a way, it was still my personal expression, but it was very much focused on almost social commentary type stuff, and trying to be like, trying to look at how not cool I am, but like look at how thoughtful I am. Look at how deep this work can be. And I was still doing stuff for my personal expression, but it just, at some point, it just wasn't the same. And I was focusing on exhibiting and whatever else. The past 3 years I've been here, I've been it's kind of been a very fresh start. What is art to me? What do I want to get out of art? I have since just embraced design work so much more. I'm finding that 50%, if not more, of what I do and what I've been doing the past year and a half has been design work. That includes moving into the jewelry stuff. You know, like making the spray paint tip necklaces. Now making like necklaces that have used like golden acrylic paint tubes. That's very design focused. But even just like some of the abstracts I've been making, I've been making art about art. That is really, you know, I was thinking just the other day, and I was being a little bummed out on myself about how my art practice has changed, and I felt like I've been stale. And I still feel that a little bit, because I feel like, the past year and a half or 2 years or whatever, I've really been focused on art about art. Let's just say the past 3 years since I moved to Lethbridge, even on the first year and a half, I did not have the studio space. But for the first year and a half, I think I was still making art about art then. It excites me so much to play with art, to play with mediums and colors and experiment and just put on some music and just go. And that still sometimes is my personal work. But like personal expression, I guess, it is not design work. I can still make art about art and simultaneously express whatever it is I'm feeling at that time. And sometimes I just put myself in a place, I just keep thinking back to this Brockhampton painting that I made in the summer. I mean, it sold underneath an hour, and I really believed in the piece. I thought it was an amazing, beautiful piece, and just visually, aesthetically great. There's really nothing emotional. There's still expression there, but I was just listening to Brockhampton. I was really into Brockhampton. I selected certain songs that made me feel a certain way, and just wanted to express that through color and line, and just with an abstract painting. How can I express how Brockhampton, or these songs by Brockhampton, make me feel? And that was that. But that was very much design work. I've been blurring the lines of design work and art about art and all that stuff together the past little bit. I guess I've been asking myself a lot, how has my art practice changed? Even before this question was brought to me, I didn't really word it that way, but I kind of was thinking to myself, it has changed, and I need to get it back on track, is what I kept thinking. I need to do this, I need to do that. I feel like I do more stuff now than I did before, and sometimes being a jack of all trades is I really enjoy doing a lot of different things. If I was a full-time artist, I would not have any complaints about where I'm at. But, sometimes I just want to focus on something for a while so I can become an expert at it or become way better at it. Then with some things, like whether it be video editing or whether it be photoshopping or just taking pictures in general or whatever, like I wish that I enjoy doing them, so I do them. And I express myself even if I'm not good, quote unquote, good at it, like in a technical sense. And sometimes I wish, oil painting is one thing. I wish that I made time to dedicate to working with oil paints, because I haven't ever. I've done like one oil painting ever, and that was a very small piece. I tried to play around a little bit. It's just something that I feel is going to take some work, and because of that, I feel like that would be something that I need to put that into my art practice. But also means I need to spend more time in the studio to do that. And I feel like I have less time now than I did 6 months ago. But I need to do that. Like, my art practice needs the benefit of me actually spending time researching and experimenting in a different way. When I was experimenting before, I was talking about just like using this material, using that material, grabbing it. It was very impulsive in a beautiful way, and I still do that. But that is why I'm so drawn to abstract work, because the immediacy of it, immediate satisfaction. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I get out of abstract work, and that's why I love it. Is that it is just, you know what? I pick a couple colors, I put on some music, that informs everything, and then every paint stroke, everything that I lay down informs the next thing that I do, and then I come to a conclusion and I resolve the work, and it's just this expression of the moment. It's very philosophy of Pollock, where I talk about, the art was the action, and this is just evidence of the art, and like very focused on the process in those minutes or hour or whatever hours. Yeah, and I still do that, and I still love that. So there's some things that haven't changed for years, and my love for just art, period, I think is stronger now than it ever was, because I have more understanding of what art is to me, and it's a much broader appreciation, and it's a deeper connection with art, because I have invested so much of my time and my energy. It's become way more a part of me than it was 10 years ago. My art practice has changed. I treat it more seriously and less seriously. It is so much a part of my life that there's no way that I can say I can't treat it seriously. I pay $200 a month, to have this space, and for me that's a lot of money when, I'm working as a sub and never know how much my income's going to be from month to month, and when I can't pay my rent with just making art, whatever. It's very, very important to me. I've understood how it helps my anxiety, how I've understood why I express things so much more. Before, it was just like I just needed to do it. I felt like, oh, this is a coping mechanism. That's an easy, it's low-hanging fruit. It's very easy for me to grasp. This is helping me. This is a coping mechanism. In my BFA exhibition, I questioned that. Is this actually helping me, or is this hurting me? Because if I keep returning to the same topics, this is mostly brought on because when I was in bands and I was creating songs, then having to, scream those songs, night after night whenever we had a show, that expression wasn't just like a painting where I just did it once and then that's it. It was the same words, the same feelings over and over again. So I've questioned that before, Whether this is helping or hurting, if it's a coping mechanism really or not, how cathartic is it? But just the act of painting in itself, to me, even though it is not just the act of creating a design piece, that act for me is important. It does not have to be something deep for me to get something out of it. Like art in itself has just helped me. I mean, that's the thing. I feel so connected to it. I feel so one with it, and that's why even like my Instagram bio is like inhaling and exhaling art. Like that's just how I have come to understand. And I know some of this does sound pretentious and whatever, but I come to understand that's how I see the world. This is why it's called Artist Life. I feel like this is not just my life as an artist, it is Artist Life. Like, I mean, that kind of means the same thing, but it's not just a part of my life, it is my life. I feel like that is the lens that I feel just everything can be art. I don't think, it's not separate. It is just a lens that is there that I don't consciously think, how can I look at this thing as art? No, it's automatic. It's just automatically I'm thinking of something as art or not art, and why it is art or why it's not art, or the beauty of that thing and what have you. I've just the past 3 years I have understood how connected I am with art, why it's important to me, what it gives to me, what I give to it, how it enriches my life, the conversation. Those are things that just, I've come to understand in the past couple of years. I have focused much less on exhibiting, and that I still need to do it. I like doing it, but to me that almost becomes a more formal, if not academic, formal, whatever thing. Yes, I would like to do, but I have not been putting my time and energy into doing that. That shows because I've only exhibited 3 times in the past 3 years that I've been here. And I think I've had more opportunity now because I'm aware. I'm part of artist newsletters, the Allied Arts Council here in Lethbridge. I still get newsletters from some stuff in Saskatchewan. There's Carfac. Like, there's all these things that I've accumulated as ways to be informed about artist opportunities, and I let them slip by me all the time. That is one thing that I need to get better at, because like I just don't look. I take a screenshot and then I'm like, I'll look at that later, and later never comes. And I would like to do that. I would like to create a body of work and exhibit that. But right now I am so content in just exploring myself through art. I think that's something I've been doing since day one. When I was writing in high school before, that's what I call art now too. I've been doing way more writing now than I have been the past, this year I've written more than the past 10 years. Like, I dropped writing almost completely. I was writing and then eventually discovered, writing on walls and then visual art. And then I was only writing when I was in bands and I wasn't doing much personal writing. And then, I had this thing where I was using just 1 line or 2 lines I can come up with, and then taking photographs of them and then integrating that as like, this is art now. Now it's art. Like before it was just 1 or 2 lines, but that's all it needs to be. That's a poem now. Like, and I've taken a picture of it and now whatever. I've just, again, broadened my scope of what art is to me, how I engage with it, what I do, how I live and breathe daily and create and whatever. But yeah, that's a lot. Again, there's always elements, and again, I should be exhibiting more. I would like to exhibit more. I guess I've exhibited 4 times. There's one thing I don't have on my CV, and it was at a cafe. But anyway, I should put that in there. I feel like I'm more aware of opportunities, and I just don't apply as much. And it would be a good thing to actually do that. I just realized there's 2 more things I need to put on my CV. I don't know, I guess I've done more than I thought since I've been in Lethbridge, but it's not near enough. I feel like I could be doing so much more. I could be seizing opportunities, applying for opportunities, and getting these things, opportunities, and making use of them. And I just haven't been doing that. I've been very content on exploring myself, like I said, exploring myself through art, exploring art, and just that simultaneous give and take of those things has been just great and just been very enriching in my life. I don't see it the same way I did before as this super pretentious thing. I still have my views and judgments of what people call art and what they make and whatever else. And as I mature in some way or another, I just become softer or whatever. Like I understand the value in not being super judgmental, but I still have lines. I still have things that I scoff at or whatever. And that's just me. That's just the reality.
depending on someone's attitude about it, but I very much opened up about what I enjoy looking at and creating, and again, I've really embraced design. Man, that is that's a way longer-winded thing than I was thinking it would be, but how my art practice has changed in the past 10 years. Yeah, I guess that's the thing. I'm so much more, at first I was very focused on how do I sell work, how do I create work for sale, and that's the other thing. Back in the day too, in the first 5 years or something, I was very much open to taking work, custom work, because I wanted to sell things. I saw this as just an avenue that might be a source of income earlier on, and I trained myself to no, that's not how it is. I need to make things for me, and every once in a while when someone does ask for a commission, if it does not fit into what I would enjoy doing for myself, then I usually don't take it. There's a portrait of a dog that I made for someone last year for Christmas. I enjoyed doing it. It kind of pushed my limits a bit. I would never just do a portrait of an animal for fun though. But I mean, again, it was close to Christmas. Finances, were lacking, and I enjoyed doing it. It pushed my technical ability, and so yeah, I just need to be honest. I can't sacrifice my desire to such a degree just to try and do something. Whatever. I need to still be enjoying what I'm doing. Basically, is what it comes down to. Whereas sometimes I was taking on custom work that I did not enjoy doing earlier on, and for many reasons. And if I don't feel like I can fulfill the request, I'm not going to take it on and lie about my technical ability to do that. So that's another kind of way that things have changed over the past 10 or so years. That I advertise custom work very, very little now. I don't push on that. I only take it on now if I really feel confident in my desire to do it, not just confident in my ability. And again, I've been way more focused on my personal expression and exploring myself through art than I have been focused on exhibiting and selling. I'm still focused on it. It's become part of my art practice to post things for sale, like now making an Etsy and stuff. Like, it has become part of my art practice to just be like, that's a thing that I just do. It's way more automatic now than it was before. Posting things on the buy and sell pages once or twice a week, seeing what happens there, but I haven't been seeking out a lot of new opportunities. I've just been letting the ones I use now, I've just been riding off those and not really pushing into these new areas of how can I sell stuff, how can I exhibit, where do I do this, how do I do that, let me break into this market or whatever. It's not really something that I think about that way. So I've repeated it many times, exploring myself through art, that's very much where I'm at. That's how my art practice has really changed. I've always been exploring myself through art, but I'm very, very, very aware of it now. I'm very aware of the effects of it and what it does for me, and I'm enjoying that, and just realizing and understanding that I'm living my life as art in a way, and wanting the desire to do that becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. I just want to be around it all the time and just be in a mode where I can take things in and then express, and take things in and express. If I could do that every day, I would be one of the happiest people on earth, I feel. That's really where I have to leave that. I can't really think of where else to go with that right now. But I'm glad for the question, because it has reinforced some of the things that I didn't even realize how strong they were, and how appreciative I am of where I am, appreciative of the space that I have, of what art has done for me, of me being able to find this outlet and this constant, I don't know, just this thing. It defines me so much, and it's just this huge part of me that I don't really know how to, I don't know, it's just something that I don't know. I don't even have words for it anymore, so I'm going to stop. Brings me to the epilogue. Someone asked me a question about art based on ethnic background. And the reason that I saved it right now for this here is because I feel it'll be very easy to answer. The short answer is no. I don't make any art based on my ethnic background. I have more to say about it than just no. But I feel like, along with what I was saying about just inhaling and exhaling art and being aware that it's so important to me that I see things through this artist lens all the time, part of it is just culturally for me, my ethnic background. If we just say that both my parents are from Chile, they're Chilean, I was born and raised in Canada, and I just don't have a lot of connection with that heritage, with Chilean culture. I wish I did. I mean, the language is something too that I wish I had. I have very limited Spanish. I understand a fair chunk usually to get by, and can speak enough to get by, maybe, but very little. And I just don't have a lot of connection to that culture or my ethnic background. So I really don't think it informs my work at all. I think that if I were to focus on studying and researching things, like that, that could inform my work, it would somehow. But I just don't. I don't even see or have ever sought out Chilean art. I have a book called Street Art in Chile from like 10 years ago that I bought off of, I think, Bombing Science or something, and that's cool. But I mean, to me, I didn't really at the time see a lot of like, oh wow, this is really Chilean. Like, the last time I've only been to Chile twice, and when I was there last time, I did take a lot of photos. There was a lot of art in the street, a lot in certain areas, just more than others. That was very like, some of it was vandalism and just some of it, there's a lot of stencil stuff there that was pretty cool. There was some political and social commentary that I saw there on the street, but there was also some legal stuff too. There was like tiles and mosaics and stuff that like covered stairs. It was colorful and beautiful in these areas. Some areas there was nothing. There's dirt roads and old buildings and houses and shacks. But then other places, Viña del Mar and Valparaiso, like that had a lot of, maybe because they're more touristy, they're right by the ocean. I don't know why, but there was so much street art. There was so much public art, and that was amazing. I don't really think that influenced me much. The colors didn't. I don't know. My color palette is already what it is, where it's very versatile. I feel in some ways already. I definitely have favorites, but I took a lot of photos and documented what I saw, but I don't think that informed the art that I make in any way. I haven't really explored my ethnic background in any way, really. I have a book called History of Chile that I've never read, and I should. I want to read it. I still have it because I intend on reading it. My mother gave it to me so long ago, and I do want to read it. I should get it going this year. But I can't really think of any way. My mom had very little things from Chile, even on the wall and stuff. Like, there's some little knickknacks here and there, but I don't even know what a Chilean art style would be like. Even in that book, like, whatever it was called, Street Art Chile, I think. Actually, it's right here. Let me see. Yeah, Street Art Chile. It doesn't even have, to me, at the time when I looked at it, and I haven't looked at it for a while, it didn't have any distinct quality that I was like, oh, this is so different from the stuff that I see elsewhere. I'm sure that it does, and if I were to look at it again, I could kind of compare and contrast from, North American street art that I see. But yeah, there wasn't anything distinct that I noticed, and definitely didn't inform what I do now. I just feel like my daily life is what informs my art practice, and I base my art on my emotions and experiences way more than I base them on the past, which I kind of alluded to before when I was talking about not really researching or having a desire to do a lot of work into art history. That is something that is very important to people, and maybe I'll get there. Is researching my own ethnic background. It's something that I don't have a connection with. I think some people have a connection with it and they take it for granted, so they don't even think about it. And other people don't have a connection with it like me, and that's why I overlook it completely, and I don't do the research or the work to really understand that part. I don't feel like it is a part of me, and I guess that's the thing. And that might change. That might change where I want to really explore this connection with all of the rest of my family who still lives in Chile, right? Like, my mother is in Saskatchewan, where I was in Saskatoon for many years, but all the rest of my family is in Chile. So that might be something that I explore in the future. I'm glad for the question, because the way that I see it, I don't, and I never have based any of my art on my ethnic background. It's not really a thing. Something I've talked about on the podcast before with Laura Lee, and I don't remember which episode it was, but talking about how my race doesn't even really play a role that much in my art. I don't really make many politically charged or social commentary stuff anymore, and the social commentary things I was making earlier were mostly based on consent and the body in a way, and relationship of bodies, but nothing political in that realm, which it could have been, but not really, and definitely nothing based on me and my race and my color. And as I was saying before my battery died, which I don't want to happen again, I need to be more prepared for that, was that even things like the racism I've experienced in my life haven't really made its way into my artwork. I think I can quote myself in the past by saying that everything that I experience somehow ends up in my artwork. So maybe somehow, very subconsciously, very minimally, but I mean nothing conscious or that I was aware of that I intended ever really, had anything to do with. And ethnicity isn't obviously just about the color of my skin at all, or race, or what have you. But that stuff hasn't really made its way into my artwork at all, just because of the experiences I've had and stuff. Or I just haven't. I don't know. I don't make very, despite how personal my ethnicity and or race should be to me, it's not in the way that it should be, being a person of color. So yeah, again, maybe that's something I'll explore later on. It just hasn't it hasn't been something that I've found of importance or priority or value to me. So anyway, that kind of wraps up that question in the epilogue there. And you got to learn a little more about me, and I got to learn a little more about myself. And for this week, that is my artist life. Thank you.